So just in the way that I'm seeing the names presented on the screen before me, I'll just kind of go in that order, and hopefully I won't miss anyone, but I will circle back to double check to see if I'm missing one in individual or two, perhaps just based on the approach that I'm using here this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Liz Cozy from United Way. So good morning, Liz.
Good morning, everybody. Liz Cozy. I'm the Associate Vice President of Community Development at the United Way. And I predominantly work in the financial wellness and the older adult impact areas.
Great.
Glad to see everyone.
Thank you. And then Lisa Reams from PCOA.
Good morning. So my name is Lisa Reams. I'm the Vice President for Programs and Services at Pima Council on Aging. And if for folks that don't know, we're the private nonprofit area agency on aging that serves all of Pima County. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Good morning. And then I believe Karina Rubio, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Karina?
Hi, yes, you are. Yes.
Great.
Good morning. I am Karina Rubio, and I am with the Arizona's Child Care Resource and Referral Program. I'm actually just kind of stepping in here for Michelle St. Hilaire, who's our Senior Statewide Program Director. And Child Care Resource and Referral is just a statewide consumer education program for childcare, anything related to childcare here in Arizona. And we're available on a childcare information line to families. And as I mentioned, we do serve the entire state as well.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. And then Haley Taman, hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I apologize. So please correct me if I've mispronounced your last name. Good morning, Haley.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'm working from another screen, so it looks like my video doesn't want to work. My name's Haley Thoman. I work at Direct Advocacy and Resource Center. I'm the Associate Director. So just here to check it out and see how we can help.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your investment of time. So thank you for being here. Good morning. And then I see Mandy Hendricks from Easter Seals Blake Foundation. Good morning, Mandy. I don't know if Mandy can hear me.
Oh, hi, good morning. Okay. You were adding me as a panelist. Here, I'll show you my face really fast. Yeah.
All right.
It's Monday. Anyways, good morning. My name is Mandy Hendricks. I'm a director here with Easter Seals Blake Foundation. We provide services to, in our division anyways, our department, to individuals with developmental and or intellectual disabilities. But our organization provides a wide range of services, behavioral health, children's. We're a very large social service agency here in Southern Arizona.
Great. Thank you so much, Mandy. I appreciate you being here. And then let's see, Adam Ledford.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Adam Ledford. I'm a management analyst here at PAG, primarily here to support Janine and help facilitate conversations and help support in any way necessary. So it's great to see everyone enjoying the conversation so far.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you being here. All right. I think that pretty much summarizes everyone I see on the call at the moment. And like I said, if someone else joins the call here momentarily, we'll kind of circle back on an introduction as appropriate. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with the agenda in the interest of everyone's time and to make the most of our meeting today. So the second topic that we always cover in our meetings is in-kind reporting. So obviously regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording the time that's donated by any attendees, volunteers, or participants. And we being PAG, we collect that data on that time dedicated to any meetings or activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. So if you as an individual who's attending this meeting today, is your salary or your role position is paid for by federal dollars, please let us know now so that we don't account for your time in that calculation for in-kind reporting. So you can send me a quick email or call me later and let me know that we should not count you in our in-kind reporting. So with that being said, time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and the meeting materials. And at the conclusion of the meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Of course, time spent working on any PAG or RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. So that is our in-kind reporting topic on the agenda. So just a reminder on that. So the next item on the agenda is kind of a review of prior meetings and fact sheets. So had one full meeting prior to this one, and with just making sure that we have kind of a broad reach and an opportunity for as many people to provide input on the social services block grant funding allocations for state fiscal year 2024. We've done a couple meetings. So this is the second one where we reached out to people and asked if they could invest some time on their calendars to be a part of the discussion. So this is the second one. So to be fair, we're just going to kind of do a quick recap so that everyone that's on this meeting kind of gets a sense of what was discussed in the last one, where do we leave off, and then it kind of puts us all on an equal foundation and a good posture for the rest of our meeting. So we're going to just kind of quickly go over that. I do see that there's a couple people that are new to this, so I'm glad we're going to take this approach. I have Adam here, and he was part of that latter meeting. So Adam, I'm going to kind of lean on you a little bit if there's anything that you think I might be forgetting, but I do have some great notes here to guide me. So hopefully I won't be led astray by my notes. How about that? So the first thing we did was, obviously, we did the in-kind reporting and all the things that we did before. And we did share the funding allocations for what has been proposed, right? It's just an initial framework from Department of Economic Security, DES, showing those proposed funding allocations. And that is kind of the genesis story of where our conversation will evolve, because we're going to ask for you to provide input about those funding allocations. So in fairness to you and to help facilitate kind of that recap, I'm going to actually show those same funding allocations that I showed in the last meeting, because I think that'll help all be on the same page. So give me just one moment to share my screen with you, and we'll do that. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. The funding allocations. Is everyone seeing the funding allocations on their screen? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to start at the beginning, right? That's always a good place to start. Sound of music, right? So for the state fiscal year 2024, what's up on the screen right now, this is for the Department of Child Safety, that particular division. And those that are familiar with this particular division, you know that there's a variety of service intents, but for the funding allocations for state fiscal year 2024, these are the service intents that were mentioned or referenced by DES. So we're only going to, you'll notice on the far left, it kind of breaks down by service category for those that might not be familiar with this particular division of SSBG. So the first is supportive intervention, guidance, counseling, and the service intent within that is to provide counseling and guidance for youth and adult domestic violence offenders due to increasing violence in the homes. And then the next is in that same vein, meaning it has a very similar service, but intent might look a little bit different. And so that's to assist low-income children and families who are otherwise ineligible for state services to access available resources, services, and benefit programs effectively. And of course, that includes counseling for problem pregnancies. So if we were just kind of take a pause there, you'll notice that for state fiscal year 2024 at the local plan level, for the first service intent that I mentioned, the amount is just over $34,000. And then for the second, you'll notice a reference of just over $182,000. So the last service intent that we'll cover for Department of Child Safety is early intervention and behavioral therapeutic activities. And so the service intent with this is to minimize the impact of the delays and problem behaviors by children with special needs or behavioral problems by providing learning assessment and support skills to childcare professionals in childcare facilities, and then behavioral therapeutic activities, including intervention and assistance to families and childcare or preschool staff would be provided. So the state fiscal year 2024 local plan level proposed amount is $69,000 and just a little bit above that. So that is what the service intents and respective funding allocations are for Department of Child Safety. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of go through the different divisions. So we still have DAS and then WDA and RSA respectively to go through, and then we will kind of circle back. But at least by going through the four elements, if you will, first, we'll all be on equal footing in terms of elements that were talked about in the last meeting. So I'm going to move to DAAS, and I'm going to try and be mindful of people putting their hand up periodically using the little icon at the bottom of our Zoom platform. But if you've ever had to facilitate one of these meetings, you know that sometimes you can get a little hyper-focused on what you're trying to share with the group, and sometimes your peripheral vision doesn't catch that little icon. So if that happens to be my story today, first thing I'm going to ask for some grace and some forgiveness on that. Second is maybe just unmute your mic and just say, hey, Janine, I'm trying to get your attention, but I don't think you're seeing me, and I'll be okay with that. All right. So we're going to move on to DAAS. And that is the Division of Aging and Adult Services. And so you'll notice that there's a variety of service intents for this one. So we'll kind of go through them one by one and try to navigate them as best we can. So for the first, it's home care for elderly adults, personal care, housekeeping, home health, and shopper service. So clients are unable to meet all the needs of maintaining a home in a safe and sanitary manner or shop for their own food and have insufficient support systems such as family and friends to assist them. That's usually the service that we are looking at. And the service intent is actually to enable clients to remain in their own homes by providing that assistance with essential personal needs and in performing routine household maintenance, including shopping for basic needs, as well as reporting changes in client status. That's very much a great segue to the next part, which is case management. And under case management, it's to enable clients to, of course, remain in the least restrictive setting possible by providing care coordination, including assessment of needs, linkage to services and benefit programs, effective utilization of available resources, advocacy, and continued monitoring. So the next part is home delivered meals, which is also an element of the pieces characterized just a moment ago. And so if we look at home delivered meals, to achieve or maintain adequate nutrition by delivering nutritious meals to the client's residence. And then next piece, you'll notice there's a slight shift in terms of the target group. Before we were talking more in elderly or with regard to that group, and now we're making a slight shift towards adults and children or adults and youth. So for emergency shelter, for the service intent, it talks about to provide immediate short-term shelter to persons who are without shelter or a fixed place of residence to prevent homelessness. And then the next element is adults, or the target group rather, is adults, specifically domestic violence victims. And we're looking at crisis intervention shelters. So the service intent is to provide emergency shelter to victims or potential victims of sexual assault or domestic abuse to prevent physical or emotional harm. And then the next is supportive intervention guidance counseling. And again, the target group is adults or children, specifically with regard to domestic violence victims. So it says to provide crisis counseling and emergency shelter, as well as assisting clients in stabilizing their situations and in accessing other services and benefit programs. And the next is case management. And so again, to assist victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence in obtaining safe and stable living situations and developing a case plan. Then we get to legal assistance, and we're talking about civil legal matters for low-income residents. And so we're trying to protect the rights of individuals by providing assistance with civil legal issues for individuals and families in need of food stamp assistance. Service intent for legal assistance. And the next section, again, for legal assistance, civil matters for low-income residents, to protect the rights of individuals by providing consultation and legal services for individuals and families facing eviction litigation. So the next legal assistance category is still with the target group of adults, more rooted in adults domestic violence victims, and then to protect the rights of individuals by providing assistance with civil legal issues, including domestic situations, landlord tenant problems, and obtaining appropriate identification for government services. And then the last but not least is housing support services. And again, you'll notice a redirect in the target group to adult and of course youth. And the service intent is to prevent homelessness by providing services that focus on addressing immediate needs, to keep persons at risk of becoming homeless in their current housing if possible, and by providing the necessary supports to maintain that housing or to locate new housing if necessary. So those are all the service intents for the Division of Aging and Adult Services, otherwise known as DAAS. And now we're going to segue to WDA, or Workforce Development Administration. Essentially only one service intent, but as you'll notice, it's quite lengthy, right? So it encompasses a lot. So we don't want to minimize the fact that it just presents as one service intent. So for employment services, it's adults, meaning any individual 18 years of age or older. And so this service intent is to provide employment services such as childcare, transportation, employment screening, assessment, or testing, structured job skills and job seeking skills, specialized therapy, including occupational, speech, physical, special training and tutoring, literacy training, GED preparation and vocational training, provision of books, supplies, and instructional material, counseling or case management that works to ensure graduation and job placement, transportation and referral to community resource for unemployed adults. Services should also include job training, and then a reference to minimally an associate's degree or certificate for programs that have a demand for skilled job opportunities. And of course, services are intended primarily for single head of households, as well as unemployed adults, elderly, low-income adults, youth 18 to 28 at risk of homelessness, families, and adults. So that is the service intent for Workforce Development Administration. And I'm going to apologize because I don't think I went over the funding amounts for DAAS. We will go back to that. So for employment services, the funding amounts are $41,700 and a little bit above that. So let me circle back to DAAS. So you can see these. That's great, but I'm just going to go ahead and verbally state them. So for the home care for elderly adults, personal care, housekeeping, home health, and shopper service, you'll notice that the state fiscal year 2024 local planned amount projections are just over 350,648. And then for case management, it's $348,021. And then home delivered meals, just over 80,725. Emergency shelter, just over 53,000 at 53,127. And then for crisis intervention shelters, 63,579. And then supportive intervention guidance counseling, $24,766.16 for those that are paying attention to the pennies on the other side of that decimal point. Case management, $37,710. Legal assistance, $19,216. And that is pertinent to the protecting the rights of individuals by providing assistance with civil legal issues for individuals and families in need of food stamp assistance. Legal assistance pertinent to individuals and families facing eviction or needing landlord tenant mitigation is $19,216. And legal assistance pertinent to civil legal issues, including domestic situations, landlord tenant problems, and obtaining appropriate identification for government services, is at $26,564. And last but not least, housing support services for preventing homelessness, $43,148.26. So I apologize for not going through that when we were in that section a moment ago. So We're going to move on to RSA. It's our final division for what we are discussing today for state fiscal year 2024. So for Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA, the first is interpreter services for deaf adults. So deaf adults who need interpreter assistance accessing needed services is the service category. And of course, the service intent is to assist deaf individuals in accessing and utilizing community services, including emergency services, by providing interpreter services. And the last service and respective service intent is supportive intervention guidance counseling for hearing impaired persons. And so hearing impaired persons who have problems in adjusting to their disability at work and in family and interpersonal relationships. The service intent is to assist deaf and hearing impaired clients in solving or learning to cope with their disability, providing intervention, support, and counseling. So for the state fiscal year 2024 local plan level, the proposed estimated amount is $23,955 for the service intent in accessing and utilizing community services, including emergency services for assisting deaf individuals. And then $34,208 for assisting deaf and hearing impaired clients in solving or learning to cope with their disability. So those are the 4 divisions and the respective service intents and the proposed funding allocations for each. So that is what we covered in our last meeting. We actually went through that same process. So the next thing we covered in our last meeting was fact sheets. And so for those of you that are on this call, you probably received an email from me saying that if you'd like to submit a fact sheet, you're welcome to. And in those fact sheets, you probably noticed that there was, varying categories of information that we asked you to kind of submit in that fact sheet. And some of those were pertinent to changes in services. So when you look at a regional need, what are the changes in services that are pertinent to that particular category? Changes in need, because we are looking at a regional need, a regional focus, not program centric or agency specific. And then changes in funding, right? There's oftentimes changing in funding from different fiscal years. So what are you aware of? What do you see future? And then of course, outcomes and effectiveness of SSBG funding. So speaking to that, and then funding sources being leveraged by social service block grant funding. So having an awareness of what that looks like. And then of course, the impact and the effectiveness of SSBG funding relative to the regional needs. So that is what was put forth in terms of a template for anyone who wanted to submit a fact sheet to help us get a better understanding and further our opportunity to get input from the community and from the experts, the local area experts, if you will, in these particular divisions as we look to make recommendations around this funding to regional council. So that's one element of our efforts to seek input from the community. So if you were able to submit those fact sheets, prior to this meeting, that'd be great. And I'll thank you for that right now. If you're still in the throes of putting that together and still want to submit that, you're more than welcome to. But for the purpose of this meeting, I'm going to go ahead and just use what information has been provided up until this point and just make the most of this conversation. We're just going to talk through what are you seeing as being the answers to kind of those questions that were put forth on the fact sheet. So I will say that in our last meeting, there were a few questions that people shared with regard to wanting to get perhaps, some broader answers from DES specifically. And so those questions will be brought to DES's attention in terms of can we get some answers around those. So I will do my best to kind of recap and what those questions were. And I think if I'm not mistaken, there was basically 3 questions. One was with regard to visual impairment, because there's a reference to the deaf community, their hearing impaired community under the last category that we were looking at, but there isn't necessarily one for visual impairment. And so kind of the why behind that. And And then another question had to do with foster care. And I believe the characterization was, to what extent does the numbers or the service intents reflect children not just in care, but also who are aging out of the foster care system, and what does that look like? And then I think the other question was with regard to just kind of getting a better historical view of what the funding has looked like under the social services block grant in years past. So maybe looking 5 to 10 years back, what's been the pattern in funding? Is it held pretty steady? Has it been a modest increase, or has it actually declined, right? What has been the trajectory? So those are the questions that we are still trying to get the answers around, and we will get those, but those are the questions that were asked in the last meeting. And so if there's other questions, we can definitely add those to the list. So, all right. I don't know that I saw any hands up, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. So if anyone had a question or a concern at this point, please let me know. Otherwise, we will move forward to the next item on the agenda. All right, so we'll go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda. I am going to take a quick pause here while we're bringing up the slide for the agenda to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out that might have joined the call while we were going through that I need to introduce to the group. I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, all right, so we're in a good posture. All right, so item 4 is really what we're here to discuss, right? It's the prioritization and the recommendations. That's what we're kind of solving for. And so just as a quick reminder, the focus of this meeting is really for you to have an opportunity to provide your input. So whatever your input is with regard to the current proposed funding allocations for state fiscal year 2024. We're going to gather that information and use those in what will get submitted to not only for public comment, but also for regional council. And so obviously regional council has representatives of mayors from all our different jurisdictions, tribal council leadership, and of course a representative from ADOT. So they are definitely looking at regional needs and looking at things through a regional perspective. And so if you're to come to the table and ask for any kind of changes in funding, meaning we'd like to move money from perhaps one category to another or one service intent to another, even if it's in the same division, we have to come to the table with a good reason to ask for that change. And so we are, fact-based and data-driven, and we do look at a regional perspective, not agency-driven or program-driven. So whatever your input is that will help provide regional council with that level of detail or that level of information as we look to make recommendations. That's what we're seeking today. All right. So let's start with first division, which is Department of Child Safety. And we'll just kind of talk through it, right? I'll get your feedback because that's what we want, is your input on the proposed funding allocations. And if you didn't have an opportunity to submit a fact sheet, I'll just do kind of some friendly reminders of things that we were looking for within those fact sheets. And this is your opportunity to kind of share what you would have put in a fact sheet had you submitted one or had time to finish the one that you were putting together. So let's start there. So we're going to look at Department of Child Safety, and it's still on the screen, in my shared screen. So as a recap,
Janine,
yes.
you are not sharing your screen.
I'm not sharing my screen. Okay.
No, you are not.
Let me go back and share it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can everyone see that? No?
Got it.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that. I forget when we switch to the agenda slides, it goes away. So, all right, so we're back to DCS. You actually can see the screen this time, so we're good. So just as a recap, the first two sections are with regard to supportive intervention, guidance counseling, and the latter is and behavioral therapeutic activities. So I'm just going to kind of open up the room for discussion on, what are you seeing? What's your input? What are your thoughts about the proposed funding? And I'm going to take some good notes, and I have a team supporting me today that's also taking notes. You're not just resting on my ability to take the notes here today. And if you have something to share, you can either raise your hand using the prompt or just unmute and share what your thoughts are. And just for a recap, we are looking at Department of Child Safety. So if anyone has input or feedback. And I will share with you that we did reach out to over 20 organizations. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but over 20 organizations to ask them to be a part of this process. So very grateful for your investment of time, because I don't take that lightly, that you're very busy, and to carve out an extra hour or 2 hours of your day is a lot. So I appreciate you making that investment. So I don't know that I see anyone with their hand up for comments or input pertinent to Department of Child Safety service intents. So if I'm just not seeing your hand, please just unmute your mic and introduce yourself and kind of share what your thoughts are. Otherwise, we will move to the next division. Okay, so it doesn't look like anyone has any comments right now. Perhaps some will come in a moment, so we might circle back just to make sure we're not missing anything. All right, so we're going to move to a Division of Aging and Adult Services, which is perhaps the largest division in terms of number of service intents. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the room for discussion on this particular division. So if anyone would like to share their thoughts, concerns about the currently proposed funding allocation as per DES on this division, I'm going to open up the room for discussion.
Janine,
Lisa has her hand raised.
What's that?
Lisa has her hand raised.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Liz. I appreciate you doing that. Lisa, go ahead.
thank you, Janine. I don't have any questions related to the funding, but if you wanted, I know we received that fact sheet late Thursday afternoon and didn't have time to put anything together for you. Do you want numbers about clients being served in these areas, or things that I feel like I would like to share some basic information to help people understand the scope of what we're seeing with older adults in these areas? Would that be useful?
I think it would be useful. Yeah, I think it would be useful if you want to share that as part of your input process. I think that would be valuable. Yes.
Sure. I wrote down a few this morning. So we are currently at Pima Council on Aging, we're currently case managing 1,164 older adult clients in our home care service. It's listed here as home care services for the elderly. So that's how many we're actively case managing and coordinating care plans for. There are another 229 older adults currently who have qualified for services based on their needs and income, but are waiting to be opened by a case manager because there is not enough capacity in the funding that we have, both from the federal government allocation through the state and through SSBG funds combined. We still have a waiting list of 229 individuals. We have currently 1,257 older adults receiving home delivered meals in Pima County. We don't maintain a wait list for that because we think getting nutrition is the most important thing to get to people immediately. So, so there's not anybody on a wait list. All 1,257 are receiving meals. 50% of the older adults that we're serving in that system are below the federal poverty level. 75% of people in that system are below 150% of the federal poverty level. So it's primarily a very, very low income older adult service. People that are above that, we ask to cost share for their service. So they pay a portion of their care, though we don't turn people away who are unable to pay. And one of the things that we're seeing just from a community-wide standpoint right now is that So we got an influx of COVID stimulus funds, both through CARES Act and through American Rescue Plan dollars, totaling $3 or $4 million as an organization. And that's great because the needs of older adults increased significantly with right about the onset of COVID, both related to COVID and just related to the inflation and housing affordability issues, both hit like right at that same time. And when you're an older adult that doesn't have really any way to increase your income, it's impossible to stay up with paying things when you're living off of $900 a month Social Security and you got like $950 instead, but that doesn't cover the fact that your housing went up $400 a month or food went up 30%. So we're one of our biggest challenges that we see right now, both for PCOA and for other providers, is that in 2024 we're going to hit a funding cliff where those stimulus funds that we got for 3 years from 2021, 22, 23, and into 2024, we had additional COVID stimulus dollars. Those are all going to disappear. They're all going to dry up and go away. But the needs of older adults weren't just related to COVID stimulus funds. They're still related to housing and affordability and inflation. And those needs are still there. And that means more older adults than ever need assistance making ends meet and getting in-home services, and the funding. A portion of the funding that's been supporting that for the last 3 years is going to go away completely. So currently we get 35 to 45 calls a month from older adults who are desperate and are being evicted or losing their housing and can't find anything affordable, can't access other systems, and we're doing everything we can to help them with emergency needs as well. So I anticipate those needs continuing and growing, and we're significantly concerned about the funding cliff when the additional stimulus funds go away that are allowing us to provide additional support to them right now. That was a lot of info probably, but that's what we see from our chair right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. I took some copious notes, and I have other people working behind the scenes taking notes as well. So I'm pretty confident we captured that. But when you share those data points today with me to align with what we're talking about today, so it's all in the same time frame, that will be helpful as far as getting input from your organization.
Sure, I can copy it.
On this particular funding category. And again, just as a reminder, the input that we're seeking is very regionally focused. We have to be very careful that it's not construed as like agency or program centric. Just all the facts or input that we want it to have a regional perspective, because that is the lens in which regional council will look at it through, is a regional perspective. So want to be fair to that, but also making sure that it doesn't get perceived as a conflict of interest. So we just have to make sure that the lens in which we look at it through is a regional focus and not program or agency centric. So whatever input you want to share would be helpful.
Yeah, as the designated area agency on aging for this region, that is what we're attempting to provide.
Sure. Right. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Did I clip you? Did you have any other information that you wanted to share, Lisa?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Janine.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. All right. Anyone else have any input or thoughts regarding this particular division?
It's just kind of an echo chamber, I guess, for me, where in terms of what we've been seeing, support for housing assistance and eviction prevention has been tantamount for the last 3 years, both for older adults and in general. So, and it's very apparent that when the federal dollars that were being provided through COVID are no longer available, that, these cliffs are definitely going to be detrimental.
Liz, I'm going to ask you just to kind of repeat the last couple sentences you said. I don't know if other people experienced it with their internet connectivity, but I feel like
because of the dog barking, perhaps.
No, I felt like the internet just kind of dipped out for a moment, and I want to make sure that I caught everything everything that you were sharing. So was about the level of housing assistance over the last 3 years, that kind of that uptick in need, and then kind of echoing that financial cliff, if you will, based on funding changes. And I just want to make sure that it's not mischaracterizing anything, because I didn't quite hear all of the sentences. So if you could just kind of recap what you'd said, I think that would be great.
Absolutely. So we have been providing emergency assistance throughout the pandemic, and the largest categories by far are for housing and utility assistance and eviction prevention. So we're, recognizing this as it relates to older adults, but also more broadly, and are very aware that when the federal funds that have been provided through CARES and ARPA are no longer available, that there isn't gap funding that we've found to, replace those dollars. So I think we're all in for a big hardship in terms of serving people. So just wanting to amplify what Lisa said about, those particular pieces. And in terms of in-home care, we have a crisis level shortage of in-home caregivers. And so that is also something that we're tracking and are aware is going to affect the older adult and individuals with disabilities populations.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate you kind of restating what you shared, just because I felt like I missed it a little bit with at least on my end, my internet seemed to dip out a little bit there. So
yeah, no problem. I turned off my video. Maybe that'll help.
Good. All right. Anyone else have any input they'd like to share with regard to state funding allocations for 2024 for the Division of Aging Adult Services? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one. And if we need to circle back, we will do that. So the next one is for Workforce Development Administration, WDA. And the service category is employment services for adults, meaning any individual 18 years of age or older. So we're going to go ahead and open up the discussion floor, if you will, for input this category. So if you have some thoughts you'd like to share, you can use the little hand prompt or just unmute your mic and share. There's not a lot of people on this call today, so I feel like we might be able to manage it by people just being able to unmute their mic appropriately. So.
I would just like to maybe comment that in our particular program, so we're a program of Child and Family Resources, which is, a nonprofit organization here, but our particular service with Child Care Resource and Referral, we do get a lot of questions, just really statewide, just all over Arizona around, people who are calling and asking for help finding childcare while they go look for work. And, navigating that is really tough because some of these programs through workforce development, at least from information we've received that we know of, it can be a challenge because some of these programs have their own requirements, right, for participants who want to come in. And one of the biggest barriers that we see and we hear about from families is, they have to cooperate with child support enforcement, for example, or, I could just think of a couple, like Maximus is one agency that does it in Maricopa. And then we have Equus, I think it's called here in PMAS. So we hear kind of the same story of, they have their own requirements. They, these parents choose to not participate because of those requirements. For example, child support, enforcement is kind of required in order to proceed as a participant in some of these workforce development or job seeking programs. So then, they're kind of in this tough spot where, in order to qualify for childcare subsidy, you have to be working at least 20 hours, you cannot get subsidy for looking for work through just the general subsidy. So I just kind of wanted to mention that because I feel as though many families who otherwise would be eligible for these programs choose not to participate just due to whatever their personal kind of choices. They don't want to deal with, some of these other requirements out of, fear that they'll get in trouble or their significant other would somehow, I don't know, it's just these issues with trying to get families into services or talk about services they may be eligible for. And, unfortunately, they a lot of times choose not to. And then therefore continue on, this path of just needing that public assistance, not getting, the assistance to look for work. And so, I don't know, I just kind of wanted to mention that, that's something we hear daily and in our just kind of work with families around the state.
So I just want to make sure, Karina, that I'm understanding you correctly with what you shared. And so I want to make sure I'm hearing it right. Are you saying that based on what you see in terms of different choices that people will make as to whether or not they want to take advantage of resources or choose not to, that on one level, in some instances, there's an increased need of support based on those different choices? And then, or are you saying, or in addition to it, are you saying also that arguably the need that you're able to calculate in numbers is arguably less than it would really be if people actually try to take advantage of the resources, but for whatever reason, they're choosing not to? I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly when you were kind of sharing that information in terms of how it represents into the regional need, so that I have it written down correctly.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more of the latter, what you said, which is, there is a need for employment services, most definitely. Families, especially after COVID, right, coming just kind of back into the workforce, but I think there's sometimes these challenges just within the programmatic requirements of some of these programs that can make it difficult for families to participate in these programs. The other kind of piece to this too is we hear a lot about just these programs are kind of siloed. You have workforce development, you have childcare subsidy, you have, even DCS, and families just kind of get stuck and confused in all of it, and aren't even just sure where to begin. And so, in our particular program with CCR&R, Childcare Resource and Referral, we just kind of help try to navigate, them a little bit and guide them into the kind of best, path given whatever their needs are. But we hear just constantly about, some of these little kind of hiccups that they come across when they do want to participate in programs. And so I don't know, it's just, just something I wanted to share. I don't know. I think programmatically, some of these workforce development programs can improve, their eligibility and just kind of that process of, getting into services to provide the services these people need. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's due to personal choice and those challenges and obstacles, they choose to kind of remain status quo. And it's, unfortunate. I don't know if that helped. Sorry.
No, it does. I had a question for Liz, and was going to circle back on, but and there's somewhat of a correlation, if you will, between what I'm going to ask you for clarification on. So the question I have for you, Karina, is when you were sharing, and it's mainly for me to clarify to make sure I'm understanding what you were sharing correctly. When you were sharing about I think you said that in order for people to receive a certain type of subsidy, they had to work a minimum of 20 hours. Is that accurate?
Yes, for
Okay.
just general childcare subsidy.
Okay. So when we're talking about regional need, I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Are you saying that, how should I say this? Were you, my impression by what you said was that if people don't work the 20 hours or more, they don't get the subsidy, but because of the need for childcare in order to work, those programmatic elements can be challenging for people to be able to get the resources or the subsidies that they need, because it's kind of like the which comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of a thing.
Right. Yes.
So if you could just clarify for me what you meant when you were talking about that in terms of the regional needs, so I can make sure I have that correct, because I don't want to misconstrue anything, but I also don't want to put words in your mouth either. So just want to make sure that I was hearing it correctly when you were talking about the 20 hours and
Yes.
the programmatic elements.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you had that perfectly. Yes. So, they're calling, asking, how do I get help paying for childcare? And then we're kind of guiding them through, DES requires that at minimum 20 hours a week to even apply for general childcare subsidy. And then a lot of these, are, well, I don't work, I'm looking for work, or, how do I get help while I look for work? And that's where it gets a little bumpy for a lot of people, is how do I do this? And so once they get in contact with some of these programs, and as I mentioned, many of them have these requirements of, I think jobs, it used to be jobs back in the day, it's Equus now here in Pima County, but they used to have require people to get on cash assistance in order to even participate. And in order to get cash assistance, you had to be willing to work with, kind of be compliant with child support. And that's where a lot of people were like, nope, I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to deal with that. And so then, where do you get them help to pay for childcare if they're not willing to go through some of these workforce programs? So that is in general, Janine, what you were saying with, those are those little kind of barriers that come up for people in that scenario. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing that, Karina. I appreciate that. So for Lisa and Liz, I just want to make sure that I was understanding some of the things that you shared correctly as well. So the things that I heard from, like, I guess you could say both, is pertinent to the housing element, right? In terms of the affordability of housing, housing shortages, et cetera, and those that are facing eviction. And so I just want to make sure that I was understanding it correctly, because I know there's 229 adults on a wait list. And I just want to make sure I understood what the wait list was for. And then the other part was with regard to I guess you could say that financial cliff, if you will, that was somewhat characterized in terms of when certain types of gap funding either recedes or goes away and entirely. If those types of funding that have been in play over the last couple of years go away, and that's what's allowed individuals who are really struggling in that space with regard to housing, et cetera, to get some level of help, what will that look like once that funding diminishes? So I wanted to make sure that I understood you correctly in terms of what you see is the strongest regional need once that funding were to recede or to go away. Is it, if it is in fact in the housing, or is it in a couple of areas? And then the other part is just clarification on the 229 that are on the waiting list, what that waiting list was for, to make sure my notes are correct.
Sure, let me address that, Janine. So the 229 individuals currently are waiting. They've been deemed to be eligible for in-home care, for in-home services provided through the coordinated county's services system. And they're waiting to be assigned to a case manager. And that's because the funding that that system receives through a combination of federal funds, state funds, SSBG funds, only allows a certain number of case managers to be hired to serve that population. I think we have 15 case managers currently. So when they all have full caseloads, we have to wait till someone drops off services to be able to add someone new onto services. So we currently have 229 more individuals who have qualified for services based on a screening assessment and are waiting to be assigned to a case manager, and that wait can be up to a year. So that's not individuals experiencing homelessness currently. That's people that we're trying to help stay in their homes with providing a little bit of assistance for them to bring some assistance into their homes. A number of those people will also experience housing affordability issues, and the fact that they have a case manager assigned to them that case manager, because these are extremely low income, vulnerable older adults who are almost all renting. So they're experiencing the same housing affordability issues as others in the community. But luckily, they have a case manager working with them that can help them stay housed or find new housing or different housing arrangements for them. Additionally, PCOA's helpline, which is for all of Pima County, that's where older adults in Pima County call when they need help, is PCOA's helpline. We see it varies each month between 35 and 45 older adults who are in immediate crisis now. They are losing their housing, their rent's gone up $400 or $500 a month, or they're being evicted because someone new came in and bought the apartment complex and is making everyone leave because they're going to redo it all and rent it differently. And so you have older adults living on $800, $900, $1,000 in Social Security. That's all they have. And they've been squeaking by with rent at $600, $650 a month someplace. And that is absolutely going away. They're have to be out by the end of the month, have absolutely no affordable housing options, can get on subsidized housing wait lists, but it'll take years for them to be available. And we hired people at PCOA with federal and state COVID stimulus funds to be able to advocate and actively work with these individuals to try to at least be somebody that can help them navigate whatever systems they might be able to qualify for. That's not a magic housing fairy, which I wish we could purchase one of those. That would be fantastic. But that's at least giving them someone, especially for older adults who are confused and don't often have a good support system to help them navigate systems. And it's confusing for us to navigate systems. And when you get somebody who's older or more vulnerable, it's even more difficult. So at least we're able to help them through some of that or provide some emergency assistance for them. But that will, as far as we can tell right now, all go away with the ending in the stimulus funds, which will happen sometime in calendar year 24.
Okay.
And our case managed services will be reduced at the same time because some of those were increased. We increased by 3 case managers with COVID stimulus funds. So that services system that's supporting older adults with in-home care will also be reduced at that point. And the need will not be reduced.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That helps clarify my notes a lot more than what I originally had written down. So I appreciate that. Thank you. It's important for me to get it right. So I like to clarify when I can. And then just to be fair to Liz, if you had any additional input in that.
Just a couple of other things. I think we know that by end of last calendar year, there were over 3,000 older adults on the wait list for affordable housing. I don't believe that figure has gone down. It's probably gone up. So that's an imperative that we're trying to tackle every day. And a lot of agencies have been really crafty with cobbling together private funds. Some of the ward offices have given funds, United Way has given funds to try to accommodate for, like I said, the gaps in funding for either eviction prevention, even packing and moving for these older adults who are told, you have to be out by the end of the month. Okay, now how do I leave and how do I get my belongings, assembled or stored, all of those things. So there's some really interesting dynamics, I think, that have come up in terms of the change in the way people need assistance. And I will also add to Karina's point, in terms of workforce development. We have a program where we're trying to increase the number of these in-home caregivers for older adults, but the individuals who are pursuing that work as professionals, childcare is a major burden for them. And that's one of the things we use private funds to pay for. So just to support them through the pre-employment requirements and process, we're paying for childcare so that they can apply for a job, so that they can, go back to work. So it is very much that chicken and egg thing where, they can't even reasonably seek employment unless they can have some support for childcare so that they can qualify for the subsidy, et cetera. So just reiterating that point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. I'm gonna lean on Adam just for a little bit, and because he's helping me make sure I don't miss anything. Adam, any questions or things that you think we need to take a moment and get some clarity on before we move on to the next section?
No, for the most part, I mean, everybody's making really great points, and I'm glad that this much conversation is going into it, because it very clearly there's a sort of a step 1, step 2, step 3 domino effect that's impacting a lot of people. But yeah, I think it just serves to highlight the interconnectedness of all these programs that have minimally overlapping safety nets. So I don't have much to add at this point, but I'm really enjoying the conversation so far.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to RSA division, so Rehabilitation Services Administration. So just as a reminder, this particular service category is for interpreter services for deaf adults. So deaf adults who need interpreter assistance in accessing needed services. And then, of course, supportive intervention, guidance, counseling for hearing impaired persons, and those who have problems in adjusting to their disability at work and in family and interpersonal relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the discussion or the opportunity for input in this particular category, if you will, for state fiscal year 2024 proposed funding intents by DES. So if anyone has any comments or would like to share pertinent to this, go ahead and unmute and give your input at this time. I think Mandy Hendricks is still on the call, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm still here. Sorry, I'm kind of multitasking on this Monday morning.
No, you're fine. I just want to make sure that I circle back with you and Haley and everyone else that's on the call to see if there's any other things that have come to mind that you would like to, provide some input around. And I know I made a promise to circle back to the Department of Child Safety division as well. So we're going to do that in just a moment. But for right now, we're still on Rehabilitation Services Administration. But I still wanted you to have an opportunity to provide any comments or input for any of the other categories as well. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, we definitely, provide supported employment services. Not so much to people who are hearing impaired, just because that's not our specialty. And so I don't have a lot of feedback about this particular
Okay.
piece.
This is Haley. We do provide services to people who have hearing disabilities. Not a ton through RSA. We do have a contract with them. I think interpreters, like finding interpreters is hard. There's been times where we need to get something filled and there just aren't enough people. Like it'll get whatever our event was, whatever we were planning, and we thought we did it in enough time. There is a real need for just more interpreters. I don't know that that helps you with this piece, but I think there is a real need. When I speak with other organizations, like I think direct stance on this is just like, we budget to make accommodations. We assume that people with disabilities exist, and so we're going to be making accommodations, and that's like part of life. But I do think there's a lot of organizations that don't anticipate that need or don't even know how to navigate that system. Like, oh, how do I book an interpreter? So if we have met people who are willing, because it's the law and they don't know the process. And then even when you know the process, sometimes, I won't say all the time, but we've had a few events where we want it to be accessible to everybody. So we want to make sure we have interpreters available, and either it hasn't been filled or like we're on the edge of our seat, 11th hour waiting for it to get filled. So I do think those are some barriers. Like if people do show up for like an interview or something, and in the 11th hour, you're told, okay, your interpreter isn't going to be here. That's a tough situation, unfortunate for sure.
So with regard to kind of the shortage, if you will, of interpreters and how it pertains to input for the funding that has been allocated by DES, are you seeing any data-driven elements that ties into why there is that shortage, or any information about like the need for interpreter services increasing or staying the same in the region? Any lens on that?
I could ask. I honestly, I got this invite like on Friday or Thursday, I think, and I don't.
No, I don't mean to put you on the spot. That's not my heart. I was just curious if you did have that. I just want to make sure you had the opportunity to share it. More in that space than trying to put you on the spot for those numbers right here in the moment. But of course, go ahead.
I see what I can find out. I know like internally our tactics have just changed. Like
Sure.
We don't just do it with like one entity anymore. We have a whole list and we just put it out there, and the second we fill it, we've just had to make more relationships. But I can certainly ask if it's more of like an increase in demand, or if it's just think more people need to be certified as interpreters. I think it's that, but I'll ask and confirm and see if anybody has some data.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So we're going to just go ahead and like circle back to Department of Child Safety, because I want to be fair to that, because we did open it up in the very beginning for discussion, and I know that was early in the call, so I want to make sure there isn't anyone that has either joined in midstream or perhaps held tightly to some of their thoughts before they shared them to just have a little bit more time to process. So it's going to go back real quick on Department of Child Safety. Just as a reminder, it's for supportive intervention and guidance counseling, showing up in areas of providing counseling and guidance for youth and adult for domestic violence. And then, of course, and to assist low-income children and families who are otherwise ineligible for state services to access available resources, services, and benefit programs effectively, including counseling for problem pregnancies. And then, of course, any type of early intervention or behavioral therapeutic activities. And so that's to minimize the impact of the delays and problem behaviors by children with special needs, behavioral problems by providing learning assessments, et cetera. So I'm just going to open up the floor for any input or discussion to this division. One more time.
Janine, I don't know. I just had one other comment based on the deaf and hard of hearing
Sure.
piece. Sorry, you jumped ahead and I apologize for not getting my hand up quickly. This is me being ignorant, so forgive me if this has been asked and answered, but has CCS, who manages community outreach program for the deaf, submitted a fact sheet or been involved in any of these conversations?
I believe, well, first and foremost, I want to say they were invited to participate. My understanding from last week, someone was going to join the call today, and I don't know if things changed or maybe it just didn't quite map out correctly. And I would need to double check my inbox to see if I have a fact sheet from them or not.
Okay, yeah, I just figured they may have the actual data you need to support, what the demand is on interpreters. And
Yes.
obviously with the School for the Deaf here, we may be able to mine some data about the number of adults in the community who would be using those services. I guess children and adults. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and on that, it does say, adults and I'm sorry, let me not try to paraphrase anything that's not already in there, but with regard to hearing impairment, right, interpreter services for the second supportive intervention, guidance, and counseling for hearing impaired persons. It does not speak to like adults or children, it's perhaps like all encompassing, if you will. So hearing impairment can show up obviously later in life. It's not necessarily something that's, throughout your entire life. So since we have, PMO Council on Aging, that's very far reaching with regard to perhaps a regional lens on hearing impairment needs. And then obviously United Way is involved in so many great programs throughout our region and serving people in many ways. I don't know if you have any additional input, data wise with regard to hearing impairment. So if you have that, or if you're able to share that level of input, that'd be great. Obviously we'll continue to reach out to Catholic Community Services, who does a lot of great work in the region, to see what information they might be able to provide through fact sheets or what have you. So thank you for asking that, Liz. I appreciate it.
Another resource really quick might be the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. They're statewide, but they're the ones that have the list of all the certified interpreters.
Right.
Well, maybe they would be aware of what's going on a, I don't want to say like a higher level. I know you don't want like statewide information, but there's other organizations that provide interpretation services and independent contractors, things like that. So they might be able to see like, has our list gotten smaller for the
Sure.
region? Are there as many people offering interpretation services?
Okay.
I can I don't know if I have chat in here. I can send you an email maybe with a link to their website.
That would be helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said in the beginning, any input that you can provide in this discussion or send to me pretty quickly would be helpful as we look to take that information and share it as part of the recommendations process, to not only for the public comment period, right, which anyone from the general public can can comment on, and then of course regional council to review and make recommendations to the Department of Economic Security. So that information would be welcome. So thank you for that. All right, so I think we've covered all four, and we talked a little bit about the fact sheets, and if you still wanted to submit that today or whatnot. I know I put a deadline for earlier in the day so that we would have them in advance of the meeting, but if you wanted to get to them to me today, that would be fine. But of course, like I said, we're just seeking input from you about these different state funding allocations for state fiscal year 2024 for these particular divisions, if you will, that are pertinent to the social services block grant. And I'm grateful for, what is it, an hour and 15 minutes now that you've invested in this and sharing what you're seeing in our region and giving us a lot of valuable input to move forward in this recommendations process. So if you're going to submit something to me today, that'd be great. We could touch base on those particulars, and I've taken your additional guidance or direction on other entities to perhaps reach out to see what data they might have, for example, with regard to interpreters, et cetera, for the deaf and hard of hearing. So I appreciate that. Anything else before we move to the next slide and move towards adjourning today's meeting?
I'm sure you've said this, Janine, but what can you tell us timeline for next engagement? If any?
Yeah, sure. So here's what I will say is, first thing is I'm going to take all the input and any fact sheets and see what we have thus far, and then we'll look to see what it looks like in terms of potential recommendations. Again, if we're going to bring something to regional council to ask for any shift in funding or any moving of funds, if you will, we have to present a lot of information to support that. So the first thing is we would want to see what we have right now for recommendations or input towards those recommendations. And then depending on what that is, then we would determine what next steps would look like. But from a bigger picture perspective, if you will, obviously obviously at some point it's going to go to public comment period and of course go to the regional council. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Janine, I'd like to add one thing if I could.
Sure.
I just want to kind of double down and really plead for those fact sheets. These engagements really do all the work to provide the context that's required to understand what the data are telling us, but really they need to go hand in hand with those facts and figures that allow for those data-driven decisions. And in that perfect, beautiful world, we'd be able to present all of that, both the narrative view and the data view, to the regional council when it's time.
Correct. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that. I mean, obviously we want to be respectful to everyone's time, and everyone has a busy calendar. And so trying to find that balance on, how often does it make sense to meet? How far reaching can we be in terms of, getting this input? And this is one of the approaches, was to have, a couple different opportunities for people to provide their input and allow us to move into the next step in terms of making recommendations and moving forward with the public comment process. But until we know what we have, we just need to be able to look at that, determine what we have and what it looks like in terms of recommendations. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide on the agenda. All right, well, I guess it's adjournment. So for some reason, I thought we still had one more talking point, but I guess the first slide or the previous slide actually had both recommendations and prioritization. They kind of go hand in hand, right? So our discussion today in terms of input gives us a lens for kind of what is the priority in our region, what are we seeing the most regional need around, and how does that tie in with the recommendations. So I think based on the discussion and all the input that we have today, we actually have a pretty decent lens of what we're seeing in the region. Obviously, there's still some opportunities in a couple of the divisions based on representation in this particular meeting. And I know some of you are going to provide some additional, so that'll be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead, unless other people have other inputs that they'd like to share based on what we've talked about so far. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. But before I adjourn it, I just want to reach out one more time and see if anyone has any other additional comment or input.
I'll just add really quickly that we can also speak a little bit to as far as the DCS fact sheet, you know, I just kind of want to add, like, I know there'll be more conversation probably happening, and Michelle, our senior program director, will probably speak to this too, but I just kind of wanted to mention that we're seeing, you know, a huge increase in, so CCR&R, we're actually a centralized complaint, childcare provider complaint line too. And so we're getting complaints every day around, just, you know, staffing, you know, I don't know how much, you know, people know on this call, like, there's definitely a childcare crisis happening right now with the supply of childcare just in our region, in our state. You know, COVID really damaged the number and the supply of childcare providers in our state. And we're, you know, as a CCR&R too, we're trying to, you know, kind of be that voice. And I just kind of wanted to speak to, you know, what we're hearing right now, which is kind of exactly that third bullet on the funding with DCS, which is complaints around children getting injured in childcare due to, you know, staffing, not having enough supervision. It's a really big problem. The other piece to this is, you know, I don't know if people are aware, but Arizona has an expulsion policy in childcare. Because we're seeing, you know, a huge number of young children, like I'm talking 1 to 5, that are being expelled from childcare due to behavioral issues, and much of which is actually rather normal development. There is just an issue with professional development of childcare staff. And so, you know, we're seeing this shift now towards this expulsion policy, helping to hopefully prevent that from happening. But we're hearing it every day, you know, issues, complaints around just childcare staff not being able to, you know, help their child through issues or work with their child, or, you know, and I think it just speaks to, you know, as I mentioned, just professional early childhood educators, and the need for that professional development piece as well. So just kind of wanted to mention that, but we do have, you know, kind of that voice on both the provider side and the family side. So just kind of wanted to mention that, because it is a very serious crisis we're kind of dealing with right now.
Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Any other last elements of input as we look to, you know, move forward with having some recommendations for DES and submitting those not only for public comment, but for regional council? All right, well, if there's no other additional comments or input at this time, I'm going to go ahead and remind everyone that if you have additional input that you would like to share, please email it to me today. just in the interest of time. And then, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am grateful for everyone's input and investment and time in this. It's great to see, I think like Adam had mentioned, that interconnectivity, it's very present, but just to be able to see the relationships at work and just in that discussion process here and how there's an overlap. I think it's a helpful reminder of the great work that is being done in this region and the many partnerships, if you will, that are within our region. So thank you again for all of your investment and time. I look forward to seeing what else you might send me today, just so that we can continue to move forward with the process, especially with making it available for public comment and to regional council. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and feel free to reach out to me as we move forward with submitting any other inputs today. So I appreciate you. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.